Nocturnal. Nightlife just got better. Forget about everything for a moment. Let's party. Let's party. Let's party. Let's party.
Oh, you're here. Welcome to Nocturnal, guys. My name is Chris Carter, and this is the only variety show that takes you back to the old school, either with our interviews, activities, or music. So, as you can see around me, it looks very historic. Yes, and there are so many books around me. It's just because we're at Jamestown Cafe located at Usher Town here in Accra. And this place actually has a very, 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 very important impact when it comes to the history in Accra. Well, let's go for a break, and when we come back, you will see exactly what I'm doing here.
Nocturnal. Nightlife just got better. Forget about everything for a moment. Let's party.
So I promise I wanna. By the way, I just play. If you don't know them, I need to educate. Give me space. I dey crazy. I don't want that in my body, dirty rape. For the love, for the hate, Mama come accept the second cake. I'll get, I let. Baby, leave him a star. My grace, no be now you go they talk. No be.
Hey! Aquaba, oh sister, I know be a brider. Give me one chance, make I be a fighter, provider. Toto for my man, make I be a pasta. We need Jumuti, make I be a sponsor.
Nocturnal. Nightlife just got better. Forget about everything for a moment. Let's party. Let's party. Let's party. Let's party.
All right, welcome back, guys. If you're just joining us, this is Nocturnal, and you know it's the only show that takes you back to the old school. So today we're going to talk to someone very important, someone that knows so much about visual communication. In fact, I will call him a visual communication expert, and he's no other person than Ni Alote Bruce Konwa. You're welcome to the show, sir.
Thank you.
How you doing?
I'm well. A little tired, but I'm well.
All right.
A little hot too.
A little hot, right?
Little, just a little.
Well, it's the weather here.
Oh, I'm used to it, but it's okay. It's Ghana.
It's Ghana,
The
right?
hustle is real.
It's real. All right, so tell us what it feels like being a visual communication consultant.
A graphic designer.
A graphic designer.
It's okay. It's okay.
Okay.
I'm just teasing. You know, the other day I was thinking. I think a lot, and I was thinking, and it came up to me. Actually, I did design. I studied design for 5 years because I did a BTech, which is 2 years, and I did a degree for 3 years. So I did design for a long, long time. Now, most people would go and do maybe 3-year degree, but in England you do a BTech to get a portfolio to go to university. So I realized that I did design for a long time. It made me understand things. I mean, in design school, like photography, you did real photography. You went to, you bought your film, you learned how to process your own film in a dark room, and then you went into the second dark room to print your pictures. So I mean, that's something we did over all the time in design school, and it becomes part of you. So, I won't say, what does it feel like? It's fun. I enjoyed graphic design. And it's funny, I think I've always wanted to be an artist since I was a child. I remember my grand uncle who's called Sakakwe, a very famous artist, playwright, sportsman. I went to visit his studio. He's a sculptor. He's like a creative all-rounder, musician. And I came back home and I was so inspired. And one day my mother asked me, so what do you want to be? I said, I want to be an artist. And she was so mad at me. She says, have you ever seen a rich artist? I said, well, I didn't tell you I wanted to be rich. I just wanted to be an artist. Well, lo and behold, I'm an artist. and I'm not rich, but it's okay. You know, maybe one day. There's still time here. So it's a labor of love. And I suppose if you have to do something in life, you have to enjoy what you do.
Enjoy what you do.
Whatever you do, if you enjoy it, then you do it very well. You know, so if I was a dishwasher, I'll be the best dishwasher in the world. If I was the man who cleans a gutter, I'll be the best gutter cleaner in the world. Because I have to, if you don't enjoy it, then everything becomes mundane.
Yeah.
You know, so it's what it is.
All right. Okay, so how important is it to incorporate visual communication in everything that you do?
It's not that you incorporate visual communication in everything that you do, but you see differently. You see differently because, for instance, in design school, we do life drawing, real nude life drawing. Everything's open. And my very first few encounters was very intimidating, you know, because there were females, women in the class and everything. And after that, it wasn't intimidating anymore.
And more you use.
Because it's the first time you actually seen a naked person who is not mad like we used to saying, you know, mentally challenged people all over Accra. But it's, and I did it for so long, it stopped becoming a problem. It wasn't really a problem because every Monday you went in and you did live drawing for 8 hours. Of course, you take your breaks and everything. But I later on realized that, I mean, I did some fun. I enjoyed life. I did some fantastic drawings. And then after that, it got to a point where now you had to find a style. You found your style, and maybe you were interested in light. You were interested in form and everything. And a few months ago, it dawned on me, you know, all that live drawing you did was meant to teach you to be observant, to observe. Because when you're drawing a live nude, you measure with a pencil or whatever, you measure everything, the head against everything. So you're measuring with a pencil length, breadth, you're measuring and you're working out angles. And this is a funny story, but because this show goes on at night, I'll tell it. The lecturer comes to stand behind me in my easel and I'm drawing. He's a man. So I've got into his private parts and he asks me, have you measured correctly? I said, yeah. And he said to me, is it anatomically possible that the penis is longer than the head? And I said, no. It means you haven't measured correctly.
Oh.
Right. So I went to measure again and checked, and to be fair, I was able to get the right proportions. But it wasn't really about getting a perfect
image. Yeah.
Image, but it's about observation and working out the angles and the lengths and everything. Sometimes you drew light out of darkness. So it was just about seeing things differently. And maybe that is what graphic design taught me. Maybe, and perhaps going into a dark room. You go into a dark room with your film and you can't see beyond your nose. That when you're processing your film, you can't see beyond your nose. The only light you get is the clock has an illumination.
Yes.
Yes,
yeah.
The clock has an illumination, and you put your film in a spiral. You put a film on a spiral because that's where you take your film out. Put it in a spiral. Put it in the, when you have the big tanks, you just don't have to put in the small one. You just put in the tank, work out your times, and the times are on the box. And once you do that, if you can process your film in a dark room, seeing nothing, it gives you so much confidence, right? It gives you so much confidence. And then you fix it and you hang it. And then you go to the next dark room to print. The magic of exposing your photographic paper and putting it in the what do you call it, the developer.
Yes.
And watching the picture come to life. Amazing. Magic. You know, and I mean, young people are now going back to film, but there are no dark rooms here.
Yeah, no dark rooms.
Yeah, there are no dark rooms. A lot of young people are going back to film, and there are no dark rooms. But everyone's photography should start in film before they jump into.
Okay.
Yeah.
So talking about photography, compare photography today and of that time. What differences do you see, and what similarities do you see?
When you say those times, it's like it's so long ago.
Yeah, well, there are no dark rooms.
There are no dark rooms, but you know, I went to university in a place. I went to university in a place where there are dark rooms. With film, if you have 12 exposures, you will have 12 chances of taking a picture.
Yes.
There's 12, 24, 36, and I think there's 48. You'll have 12. Now, so you're very careful about what you do. You're careful about your composition. You don't want to take a picture where by the time you go look at it, the traffic light is coming from behind your head. Doesn't look so good.
Yeah.
So you observe and you look, and you keep on looking until it's right. And it means that you have to be patient. So when and film teaches you to be patient, but with digital, you have a 10 gigabyte card.
You just
you can
shoot.
take, and
Yeah.
it's fine because it frees you. It frees you. For me, when I use a digital camera, I just click because I've seen what I want to see. I click, and I pick out a good one. You know, maybe I don't, but it goes somewhere and it's kept. One day, the picture will come to use. So it's nice. I think it's wonderful that people are kind of have the freedom to have cameras on devices that they can take pictures all the time. And it's beautiful that it means that the whole world is being documented all the time. Every day, the whole world is documented. The worry is, how do we now keep these pictures and store them?
Okay.
So that, and of course, I mean, the Instagrams, the Facebooks, the Flickr, you know, all those online social media spaces,
Yeah.
you know, are hosting these pictures. So, I mean, millions of pictures are posted every day. It's unbelievable, you know, and which is wonderful. I suppose, you know, what I like about it is that, you know, everybody's a photographer, unless you're a specialist photographer.
Yes.
Unless you are. But, you know, I can call a kid on the street and give them a DSLR and give them like a 10-minute tutorial on what to do.
And
they'll come back with good pictures. You know, they won't be able to talk about the
Aperture,
f-stop, film
exposure.
speed, exposure, camera speed, all of that. It's okay.
Yeah.
They won't be able to talk about that's for the professionals, but they will be able to take a
picture. Yeah.
You know, and all those instances and all these cameras that you have, they're there. When I used to teach at AUCC.
Yeah.
And I taught visual communication, and we built a dark room, and every student was supposed to build a pinhole camera. And for me, when I teach, I like to go back for people to understand. So when I go to a class, I bring an old camera, I teach them, blah, blah, and I heard the students went to complain, oh, Mr. Bruce Conner is always talking about aperture and blah, 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 and blah.
Exposure.
Yeah. It's like, oh, you know, this teaching business is hard. But they understood when they started exposing photographic paper to light with their pinhole, and a lot of them couldn't even get it right because the timing. Sometimes it's overexposed, sometimes it's underexposed. I was actually able to do one, which was quite interesting because I wasn't expecting to get anything fantastic, but it worked. You know, I got a nice picture that I think is on my Instagram somewhere. If you go, you can see. But it worked for me, and but it's good grounding. You know, so I suppose people have to learn anything, you have to go to the source.
Okay.
You know, you have to start from the beginning. When we see people playing football, they didn't just start playing football. You know, when you see people playing basketball, they didn't just start playing basketball. When you see Serena and Venus, I remember them when they were kids. And there was a new story. So everything you do, you have to learn from the basics, start from the basics, and work your way up.
All right, so talking about starting from the basics, I actually watched one of your videos on YouTube about it was you talking about your thesis, digitizing our past for posterity. And then I thought that was very interesting. Can you tell us a bit about it?
I'll give you a little background about my digital life. I used to work for a company in Brixton, which is a photographic cooperative, and they needed somebody to come and train photographers on how to scan their film, and I got that job. And besides that, I would design their newsletters, design the communications for the exhibitions. And I think I did some really, really great work with design there. I redesigned the newsletter, and I had a lot of creative freedom because I was my own boss.
Yeah.
And besides training them to scan their film and retouch their film and all of that. And in those days, that was just the beginning. They were still doing film, and then scanning their films was just a way to at least keep a copy. So just in case this film gets damaged, they have copies of scanned the films, the pictures. So that's where my thing about photography. But because I had a background in photography in design school, it was easy for me. They had dark rooms, they trained people, they had workshops, they had training, all sorts of. So it was a really, really wonderful place. And it was run by this wonderful woman who had a passion for photography. This was a cooperative, so it wasn't really a profit making, but the business ran itself, made money and ran itself. It's like a social enterprise. And so that is where the background of my association with all this digital stuff comes from. And then I met James Barno, who is now very, very popular around worldwide. It's like a photography celebrity.
Yeah.
And he was introduced me by my friend, confidant, uncle called Ade Sawyer, who is a management consultant. And he went to meet James Barno, and he says, Alote, I have to go and meet James Barno because he has all these pictures. He has all these pictures, knowing my background in scanning. He has all these pictures about, everything, independence, oh. So one day I went to see Mr. Barno, and he just starts pulling pictures out. What blew my mind? He had pictures of members of my family.
Wow.
He had pictures of people I knew. This man was like a society photographer.
Yes.
His studio is still, the building is still there in Jamestown. There's another studio on Horse Road, just here, Studio X23. And he just pulls out pictures. So he pulls out a picture of this little girl and Stanley Matthews. Stanley Matthews, if you might want to know, is the oldest person to play in an FA Cup final in England, one of the greatest footballers in England. And Stanley Matthews was in Accra as a sports ambassador during Ghana's independence. And my grandfather, who was the headmaster of Accra Academy, A.K. Konua, was also an ardent sports person and sportsman and fan and everything, was happened to take him around. So there was a hockey match in which my grandfather was there with my aunt. So anyway, he shows me this picture. My aunt is now retired. She's probably like 63 or 64 years old. So she was about 3 years old. And James Barno shows me, he says, Alute, who's this? And I'm looking at it thinking, I just came to see you to collect pictures to go and scan. This is a trick question, so what? If I fail this trick question, you're not going to give me the pictures or what? So I looked at it carefully and I said, that's my Aunt Aku. And he said, you're right. How did you know? I said, well, I can tell.
What?
Right? So that was it. And from then on, we became very good friends.
I'm just going to cut you right
Okay,
there.
then.
Right. All right, guys, so it's time for us to take a quick break, and when we come back, we are going to continue with this wonderful story from Ni Alate Bruce Kunwa.
Nocturnal, nightlife just got better. Forget about everything for a moment. Let's party. Let's party. Let's party. Let's party. Yeah.
In a banging, since me youngin', living and learning, dressing and flexing. You have been posting and liking, commenting. I dey live my life the way you just inspire. Go back, in, 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 back, in. So them,
Nocturnal, nightlife just got better. Forget about everything for a moment. Let's
back, guys, and thank you for joining us. And if you're just joining us, this is Nocturnal. All right, so you were saying?
So anyway, I ended up leaving his house that night flat with a scanner, a big flatbed scanner, and some negatives, about maybe like 100 or so negatives, because he was leaving to go to India. He's a Hindu. He practices Hinduism.
Yeah, Hinduism.
Yeah, and so he was going to India, and so he gave me everything. I set up shop in Adesoya's office in Brixton, Equinox Consulting, and so every day that's what I did. I went there and we scanned photos. Some of them were cracking up, so I said, let's just scan these photos. Because the idea was that when I saw these negatives, I was like, you know what, the GBC had just lost one of their libraries burnt down, and they lost a lot of.
So that's a lot of data.
And I'm like, you know, we can't leave this thing. If we leave it and it burns down to, and that's it for us.
It's all gone.
So I was really passionate about this, and that's what started our partnership and friendship, you know. And it's not just, he's like a grandfather. He's a friend, personal friend. He's a professional colleague. We talk about a lot of things. We talk about photography. So he sends me a lot of photos, you know, every day. Sometimes he sends me photos, I don't reply. And, you know, he's very kind of technology savvy. He's on Facebook, he's on Instagram, he's on this. He's sending me emails, but look, I sent you some pictures like 3 weeks ago. You've said nothing. I was like, oh, Mr. Bano. Okay. So anytime, but, you know, I call him and say, hello, Mr. Bano, how are you? Everything's okay. He says, oh, you know, blah, blah, blah. But, you know, fantastic guy. He's from Jamestown. And really, he's like the chronicler, the visual or photographic chronicler of this community. And he's not the only one. There were other photographic giants in this community, like the Bruce Vanderpoys, like Dio Gratias, the Lutrots on Lutrot Street, Mrs. Is Mr. Kwon Ansa's sister, who ran a studio in Akotolante. Mrs. Aban was a female photographer, and which was very, very unusual, you know, in those days. But she also has a big body of work. She had her own studio, and she did work. There's Mr. Pobi, opposite Tiptoe, who also modern photos, who actually owned Tiptoe, the nightclub. And he didn't just own Tiptoe, he owned some of the bands that played at Tiptoe. So
it's an all-round creative
photography
too.
has been a very important feature in our history. Yeah.
Wow. All right, so I know you came back to Ghana at some point and decided to start finding yourself. That's what we talked about off camera. So tell me about finding yourself as an African.
I was christened George Frank Alote Bruce Konoa. Now, my surname alone sounds un-Ghanaian.
Yes.
So if I said I was George Bruce Konoa on the phone,
it's like an Englishman.
yes. Sometimes people say, oh, I have an accent. Yes, so I lived in England, so I'm allowed to have an accent. But finding yourself means that if you lived somewhere for so long, and you kind of, a lot of people found themselves living abroad. If you lived here, you're here. If you lived here,
exactly.
you are here. You are always in it. But if you're abroad, if you are somewhere else, you kind of now start to see yourself different, because you are the other and you are the minority.
Exactly.
So you can decide to be like everybody, or you can decide to be yourself, and that's what makes you different. So a few years ago, I'm sure it was kind of through music, I started listening to things like Linton Kwesi Johnson, Fela, you know, oh man, I should have put a Fela, but Fela is too long to play on a show like this. A Jack Onimo, you know, Jill Scott Heron. You come across things, you come across people who introduce you to new ways of thinking, different ways of thinking that is way, way, way different from the way you thought. You know, so finding yourself means that you have to find yourself as a Ga, find yourself as a Ghanaian, find yourself as an African. You know, embrace the things that are, I have to say, the positive things about being African. You know, you can't change where you come from. You can't change who you are. So whatever you are, you better carry along and do the best with it. So that is what finding oneself means. So my name, George Frank, is still on all my official documents, but I introduce myself as Alote. You know, Alote is also is also, you can call me Ni Alote, because everybody that's you see here in this community say I'm Alote, they know, oh, you're from Simpe. The Simpe chief is called Ni Adote Otinto. If you call me Ni Adote, it's the same name. So that's putting myself somewhere in this milieu, in this space.
Yes.
And claiming my space as a Gambian, claiming my space as a Ghanaian, claiming my space as an African. And it's also about identity. And when I say that name, then you know exactly, you can take me to exactly where I come from. And that's the thing about, you know, especially the Ghana names. When you say you are Niadi, they know you are from Atukpai. You know, say you are Nitaki, they know you are from Abola. You know, when you say you are Nilante, they know you're from Lante Jawi. You know, these names take you to a certain place. And that is about identity. So finding yourself is about identity. You know,
Right.
it really is about identity. Once you have that identity, then you do whatever you want to do with it. And of course, you have to do good. So for me, it's a very important spiritual moment for me. That time I decided this is how I want to be called. This is how I want to be seen as. Because you control that, you know. So but I mean, that video talks a lot beyond a lot of things that we'll talk about here, and I won't talk about that.
Yes,
that.
definitely.
But it's really about ourselves. So, for instance, our traditions. You know, as a child, I used to carry the pot in which the pukpoi was taken and sprinkled. And I used to go with my grandfather. I was probably about 7 or 8 years old. You know, and my grandfather and I were very close. My mother's father, we're very close. I lived with him for a couple of years. And when we go into the room where the deities are,
Yes.
you know, there's a special room in my great-grandmother's house, you know, and we go there, and I'm carrying the pot. When you carry the pot for the pukpoi, you can eat the fish from it. And me, I love food, though. When you see me like that, I like food. So you eat, and the fish is always the choicest fish, you know, proper opoku, big opoku smoked, you know, oh man. And I'll eat the fish. My grandfather thought I was being brave. He didn't know that me, I wanted to eat the fish, so I'll carry the pot. But I mean, those things I did as a child. I enjoyed those moments at the Homo War. So every now and again, my older cousin would call me, Reggie, and say, Nilante, he says, I remember when we used to go to Daddy's place at Homo War and we eat and stuff. I say, yeah, we have to recreate it. You know, those are very, very important moments in our lives. And we are tending to kind of discard all these moments and take it on a new culture, which is not ours.
Yes.
And hence that video is not ours. And we're always trying to denigrate ours and say all sorts of things.
About
a lot
ours.
more people said so many things about those cultures a long time ago. And we believe them. And that is why we are where we are. It's not to say that everything is right, but there are certain things that we have to keep. And I'm very passionate about that. So for instance, you know, like the outdooring, the simple outdooring where the affirmations are said, they put the sugar,
yeah.
and they put the salt, they put the spirit, they put the water. And it's to say that don't lie. If it's sugar, say sugar. If it's salt, say salt. We don't do, and even with my people here, they don't do it anymore. They do it no more. They just have a big party.
Everybody comes to dance, eat and go.
Yeah, and you know, people buy some buckets and stuff. People pay money for soap and all of that, and they go. You know, I used to have problems with that, and then one day I actually witnessed one, and it kind of brought home the idea that it takes one to have a child, but a village to look after the child.
Yes.
And that day, they made donations. You know, they were picking the bucket to go count the money. And I stood there, and I understood. I understood that, yes, maybe they make a lot of money, and this money is supposed to go and look after the child. Sometimes the money the parents will use to start a business, which looks. So there also this culture is changing, and you know there are certain people who won't do that. You know, a lot of people say, no, me, I won't sell my child.
Yeah.
But this is the way it is happening, and that's the way they're raising money. Fair enough. If it works for other people, it's okay.
Good.
You know, so it's and for instance, when you see funerals, I used to get angry about funerals. Because you're driving in town, you turn somewhere and it's blocked. You turn anywhere, it's blocked.
It's blocked.
And then, I think too much. I like to analyze and deconstruct.
That's why you're an artist.
Well, so it came to me, and that video is part of it. In African thought, we don't die. We believe in reincarnation. So before you're born, we're all in the spirit world, under the ground. When you're born, you come to, it's called the Kenga, and that is why we greet from right to left, and it's the anti-clockwise, right? So you go to the 3 o'clock, where you are maybe like 25, and then you go to the top, which is noon, where you're like 50, at the height of your, and then you go to the 9 o'clock, where you're like 70, 80,
yeah.
And by then you are old.
Then you come back.
And then you go down.
Down again.
Yeah. By the time you go down, there's somebody ready to come in your place.
Oh, okay.
Yes. And that person, and that is why when a child is born, a child is like 1 year, 2 years old, they say, oh, this child is behaving like his great-grandfather who died like 2 million years ago. Have you ever heard that before? You haven't heard that? Have you heard that before?
Yes, we have.
Yes. Yes, because this child has come just like his grandfather, right? And that is our belief. I think it's a very valid belief. So when I go back to this funeral thing, my thinking and my theory is that anyone who is born is supposed to die.
Sure.
And so those are the two things, death and taxes you are assured of. Now, if you die, if you're born, we celebrate, right? And then now we say we celebrate when people die. And whatever it is now the culture.
Yeah.
So what can we do? But my theory is that when you die, you fulfilled one of the things of life. Because you're born, you're supposed to die.
You're supposed to die.
So we celebrate your death. When you die, we celebrate you. When you're born, we celebrate you. And when you die, it's victory over life. That's my theory. Nobody should quote me. But if it makes sense for me, it makes sense to me. So we celebrate you. The unfortunate thing is that when people are alive, we don't take so much notice of people when they're alive. But when they die, we get all emotional and teary-eyed. And, we want to show off. And maybe that's what we should do. But taking care of people when they're alive, rather than getting all showy and spending so much money when they die.
Yeah.
Nocturnal, nightlife just got better. Forget about everything for a moment. Let's party. Let's party. Let's party. Let's party.
And our match today, Arsenal, they play Paris Saint-Germain.
Number 20,
What we've got here is a matchup between two of the quickest players on the planet. The majority of the history of the home games have been played there. Now it's moved to a state-of-the-art stadium, and a big revenue stream brings in a huge amount of money here.
It does get interesting as well this season. The fact that Tottenham have got this shiny new stadium just across North London. I think there's even a bit of pressure on the Arsenal fans maybe to get this name out.
Chance to get the ball in the box. It's the middle from Monreal. Good punch from the goalkeeper from the cross. It's half time and we're still waiting for that first goal. It's Paris Saint-Germain who start this second period. Still passing, but not really making inroads. Excellent interception.
Could be a chance here.
left in the second period of extra time. Well, that's what, threading it through. He's through here. The keeper's nerve here. Well, he's not far out, but you've got to be on your toes in these circumstances. He was. It's a tough game for the team that are trailing. Now they've got a chance.
Oh, Arsenal. Oh, this time cool.
Nocturnal, nightlife just got better. Forget about everything for a moment. Let's party. Let's party. Let's party. Let's party.
All right, guys, so we are still here at the Jamestown Cafe with me, Alote Bruce Konwa. We've been talking about visual communication, pictures, and how important stories are in pictures, and so much more, and especially preserving our history. So now, let's talk about music. Tell me your top 5 music.
My musical tastes are quite eclectic. You know, I like what is going on now. I know my level. I enjoy it actually. I don't
You
know
like
why.
everything?
I like Shatawale. I like Davido. I like, you know, the new guys. They're playing some nice music. Last night I was on a jazz, Afro jazz thing at the Jamestown boutique in Jamestown. Interesting, you know. And I have a lot of music. I listen to a lot of music, different types of music.
Yeah, but when it comes to the old school, what do you
No,
listen?
I don't call it old school. So, for instance, I mean, the other day, last night, Pieces of a Dream came to mind. I love Pieces of a Dream, and there's one tune, Warm Weather. I like the warm weather. It's hardcore. That reminds me of maybe like 20 years ago when I was younger and partying hard like there's no tomorrow. You know, so it's one of those tunes. A few years ago, I was involved with producing the first ever CD for the Ghana National Symphony Orchestra. I'm sure not a lot of people know that there's a symphony orchestra in Ghana. So if you don't know, I'm saying it now.
Now you know.
Now you know. There's a symphony orchestra. The director is called Isaac Arnaud, and they're based at the National Theatre. So the title is the CD is Ghana National Symphony Orchestra plays highlight classics. And I started this project, and it was later on, an engineer came on, and Dr. Odue of Class 233 was very instrumental in getting everything off the ground and you know, funding it, literally. Thanks to him. I mean, it's a great support to musicians and music in this country. Dr. Adrian Odue. And I designed the CD, of course. I designed the book. You know, I designed everything.
Thank you so much. It was nice talking to you, and you are actually, you know, inspiring. You're actually very, very inspiring, and we want to say thank you for coming on the show. It's been great having you, Ni Alote Bruce Kunwa. All right, guys, we hope you enjoyed the show and you also learned from the show. My name is Chris Carter, and this has been Nocturnal. See you next week. Bye.
Nocturnal, nightlife just got better. Forget about everything for a moment. Let's party. Let's party. Let's party. Let's party.
I say you only live once. YOLO. For the boys, for the girls. To the niggas with it, no sense, oh well. For the man, them, for the young girls. For the ones in love, but they can't tell. Yeah, so put your hands in the air, like you really don't care. Yeah, to the left, to the right. Oh, you go there, be care. See a Joe girl on there. Be a Joe big girl. 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 See a Joe girl on there. See a Joe girl on there. Yeah. Be a Joe big girl. Be a Joe big girl. Be a Joe big girl. See a Joe girl on there. But we just did it. Yeah, be like everybody they want take me photo. Hey, no be giddy jigga for mellow. Do one fast, do one slow. You for I say you only live once. YOLO. For the boys, for the girls. To the niggas for the no say it's all well. For the man them, for the young girls. For the ones in love, but they can't tell. Yeah, so put your hands.
Me nam na metete, me nam na metete, anda. Say Betty. Finally, oh, it's about to go down. You just say money no be problem. Finally, oh, it's about to go down. When my baby, oh, it's about to go down. Oh, my sexy lady, it's about to go down. For your jump so okay. Walubenu. She be like a first boss. Post no to or rent to cementos.
You see the girl in back. If I get for my yard. Charlie, they do not too big. You they watch very close. She did Gialanta. But then when she start, they walk sharp. I just say come for me no. Charlie, if I get them one-on-one when nobody comes, she go scream, oh my God.
Yeah. Nocturnal. Nightlife just got better. Forget about everything for a moment. Let's party. Yeah. Nocturnal. Nightlife just got better.